Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome back, or indeed, welcome if you're not back. This is episode 1, I suppose the first one was episode 0. This is my dual-wielding character going through Dark Souls. And this is just a bit of an exploratory, videoing some gameplay and trying to do a bit of sort of talking about what Dark Souls is like, in case you've never played it before. If you have played it before, then you can laugh at how terribly I'm generally playing. So, yeah, so last episode, I took a bit of a shortcut in order to get a second weapon, as I am going to be playing this without a shield, as long as I can, hopefully through the end of the game. Some bosses are going to be very interesting, but, we'll see what happens there. Frankly, some enemies later on are going to be pretty interesting. So, yeah, this is the actual start path via the, I guess it is a aqueduct, viaduct, I still don't know which is which or what this qualifies as. But there we are. So I seem to be fiddling with the inventory here for... oh yeah, this is just me demonstrating that I didn't actually do anything drastic. So this character is at starting level, so level 3 for the Wanderer class is base level. So all I've got is an upgraded sword, which isn't that much upgraded, to be honest. I think it's actually less upgraded than I managed in my sort of little intro walkthrough showing what I did. That was, as I mentioned last video, just with a little demo character. This is the actual character I'm using for the rest of the game, which I created first, because why do things forward when you can make them hideously complicated and hard to understand? So, this is probably a good point to mention a few things about Dark Souls that are generally worth knowing. The first one is, this is the PC version. It's in pretty much all ways identical as far as the basic game goes to the original PS3 and to the Xbox version. Slightly different icons for button presses is about the only difference. The PC version does have extra content, most of which I haven't seen yet. It's kind of optional and hidden. You can easily find out how to get to it via the wiki. But yeah, the actual main game remains the same all the way through to the end. This is the PC version, but I am playing with a controller. Not by choice, I would much prefer to be playing with mouse and keyboard. Mostly the problem is turning and targeting are really awkward with a mouse. It's really geared up for an analog stick, and even though a mouse gives you really good analog movement, on at least one axis, well, two axes I suppose technically, because it's 2D, it's really not the same. So, yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing is, I mentioned classes in the last video. So this guy is a Wanderer. That means he's kind of light armor. He starts off with a curved sword, which is what I'm using to parry, and he starts with a smaller shield. He doesn't have much else that's special going for him. His stats are quite reasonable. Different classes have different base levels. That doesn't mean very much, really. I mean, XP is slightly, literally less to level up. For if you start at level 1, your class, like the Pyromancer for example, starts at level 1. He's very popular in people doing SL1, so Soul Level 1 playthroughs. But there really isn't that much between all the classes, as I said before. I probably wasn't very clear, in fact. I mean, you essentially start with a different set of abilities. So if you start with someone like a Pyromancer, for example, then you'll start with your I can do magic item, so your Pyromancy flame, in that case the sort of Pyromancer's glove. But you can pick one of those up very early in the game, even if you're not a Pyromancer. All of the weapons, all the starting weapons for all the classes and all the starting armor is actually listed around the world anyway, so you can start with anyone and you can swap in any gear you like from any class as the game goes on. So it really doesn't matter what you pick initially. When you first get started, I'd literally just pick something that looks like it's going to accommodate your playstyle. So if you want a class that's really good at sort of taking damage and you know, you're going to go for heavier weapons, then I go for something like a more strength-based, heavy armored class. If you're looking more for a sort of fleet of foot type character, the thief is a fantastic sort of class, but it is more interesting to play. You do need to be pretty good at dodging around, but then you get most of your damage from special moves like sort of parries, or rather riposte after the parry, in fact, and in backstabs, other sort of critical damage really. And you really don't do much to bosses with a little knife. Though I have got towards completing the game with my thief, with just starting gear and just straight damage upgrades. It is very fun, but it's a bit harder. You can start as a spellcaster. Spellcasting is actually pretty excellent in this game. The only problem I'd say you'll have is you really may end up with some difficulty as the game goes on if you're not using a wiki, if you're playing a literal straight spellcaster, because most of the really high level spells are hidden, the upgrades are non-obvious, and you have to do certain things in order to get them. Essentially you've got to rescue people who can teach you, pretty much, but they're in locations that you really won't find unless you're a real hero as far as, you know, finding obscure locations goes. They really are. It really gets very obscure, you know, going back to places you've been already, and suddenly it turns out there's a guy there who wasn't there before, and there's no other reason to go there, and, you know, repeatedly doing that sort of thing. It gets very odd. But they are very viable. It can take a bit of research for that. Pyromancy is a very good backup magic for all classes, so that's just flame magic, sort of classic fire damage spells. You don't need anything special for that. It's actually, if you fancy a bit of fire magic on the side, you can invest XP in that, and you don't need any special stats, whilst spellcasting and you know, healing as well, you know, the faith-based magic are stat-based, and you will need to put points into the relevant stat, so that's intelligence or faith for those. Pyromancy, you just put XP into leveling it up, but you don't need any special stats, so that's kind of really nice as a backup. You can play a heavy armoured guy who can whip out fireballs when necessary, if you want to spend the XP that way. So you've just got a lot of flexibility, really. The faith-based classes are really interesting as well, like the cleric. You know, you'll start off with some extra heals, which, given the very limited availability of Estus flasks, is actually really nice. And as you go on, especially if you ally with certain NPCs, you can pick up some rather nice offensive spells like lightning bolts, which are fantastic and just incredibly fun to use, especially if you're doing a bit of co-op on a boss. It's just really nice lobbing lightning bolts into something while someone else DPS's it down. It's very satisfying. So yeah, you've got a whole range of options really. There's a whole lot of stuff to explore, and you can replay this game over and over again, and you can play a very different game every time depending on, you know, what sort of class you've chosen really. So yeah, I thought I'd cover stats sort of briefly as well. The basic stats in the game, and there are a lot of stats on the screen, there's a lot of numbers. It can be quite hard to understand initially, as very little is explained, and the translation, the localization rather, does get in the way. So, and the main stats really are strength, dexterity, vitality, endurance, attunement, intelligence, and faith. So strength and dexterity are essentially upgrade and equipment wielding stats, so certain items, heavier weapons will require a lot of strength, and heavier armor, potentially. Specialist weapons, or you know, certain kinds of weapons that are more not just down to brute force but down to technique, they'll have higher dex requirements, and a lot of weapons will require a moderate level of both. So once you've got used to the game, it can well be worth just considering what sort of weapon you want to go for and kind of statting accordingly. Then your other stats that are relevant, and vitality and endurance. Vitality controls your health bar primarily, and endurance is your stamina bar. All of your attacks, dodges and rolls, that sort of thing, and also you know, if you get hit and you're blocking with a shield, all of that depletes your green stamina bar, as does running. So you can actually see that as I'm running here. You know, the bar is depleting as I get hit or hit things. You'll see that go down as well. So high stamina is really good if you're going to be really active in combat, or if you're wielding a heavier weapon, or you take a really big hit on a shield. That'll take a lot of stamina down. And if you essentially run out of stamina, then you'll start taking damage, and you can easily get sort of stunned effectively by big damage as well. So high stamina is a good thing to have. So you know, reasonable points in endurance is good. Reasonable points in vitality is pretty good as well. Vitality, I mean, you probably want to invest a fair number of points in it, but you can't kind of make a vitality build very easily unless you're also going for really heavy armor, and even then, I mean, you essentially against most enemies, you can't really take a lot on the chin. You've got to. It is all based on technique. It's all based on avoiding damage and you know, being in the right place. So it's that is something to bear in mind. You kind of can't just health bar your way to victory, really. But I mean, it's kind of a supporting stat. It's vitality and endurance are both good places to put points if you're not sure what else to do with them, really, or if you've got, you know, everything else covered, you know, or if you're just trying to put some XP somewhere useful and you're not quite sure where that's going to be. You know, it's a reasonably safe bet. So then intelligence and faith are for the different kinds of magic, so intelligence for spellcasting and faith for sort of miracles, really. And there are just certain requirements on different spells, effectively, at different levels. And the more points you have in them, the more effective, the more damaging, or the more healing, in the case of healing, your spells will be. Otherwise, and that's the main thing those do, really. And there are kind of secondary functions on a bunch of stats, but they're not worth worrying about initially. Resistance is probably one of the stats I pay least attention to. I'd say it's arguably one of the least used stats in the game, so I wouldn't particularly do anything with the resistance stat. I just ignore it. Attunement is a bizarre one. It's not quite clear when you start out, but essentially attunement slots are it's very sort of D&D. You have to memorize spells, and you can only memorize a certain number of spells simultaneously, and you have to do that at a bonfire, so you can't kind of change up your selection mid-combat. And the number of simultaneous spells that you can have is controlled by the number of attunement slots you have, and that's controlled by the attunement stat. So it just makes you, the game just makes you sink points into those if you want to have a lot of spells simultaneously. If you just, like, you know, you're playing a cleric and you want some heals as a backup, you won't, and that's it. You know, you're not going to need to invest any points in attunement because you've got the slot you need. And there are items that can boost you know, the number of attunement slots you have as well. So that's that one, really, and that's most of everything. So I mean, really, it's about what style of build you want, what items you're going to equip, and then just making sure that in terms of you know, health and stamina, that you've got enough points. But stats in this game are really not significant as you might imagine when you start out. It's mostly down to how good you are at playing it, how good your technique is, and how much damage your weapon does. And largely weapon damage, whilst in some cases it's affected by your stats, that is not the bulk of the damage. So you won't get, if you stick all of your points into dexterity, as long as your weapon is a straight upgraded, it's not a special lightning or fire weapon, for example, when what they call damage scaling is disabled, because you've got magic going on. As long as your weapon is just an improved, you know, lump of metal, then yeah, if it's a dex-based weapon, your dex will help. But really, you're much better off getting, you know, a +5, buying Titanite shards and getting a blacksmith to upgrade your weapon, than you are sinking points into the stat. It's why you see a lot of people doing, you know, oh, we're so clever, level 1, you know, runs through the game, because yes, they are level 1, their stats are basic, and they've got, you know, a sort of a +10 plus fire enchantment kind of, you know, sort of rather lightning enchantment, you know, weapon, and they've got some pyromancy going on. They sort of put all their points in that instead. That isn't based on level, so they can have max level pyromancy without actually leveling up the character. And that is so the level really doesn't matter. You can complete the game at level 1 because it's not level 1 in the sort of sense you'd imagine if you've played other RPGs. You know, it's not. A lot of things aren't capped to the level. So yeah, so that's the basics of that really. So here I'm just obviously continuing to work through fighting various monsters. Now this is so in theory at this point I should be moving on towards the boss. The next boss is pretty much the next monster, but I've decided I'm going to stop off at this guy for some reason. This chap is completely optional, this Black Knight. He just sort of stands there and guards a small item. I just kind of fancy killing him for the practice, as you do meet a lot of these guys later. We actually ran past one of his cousins when we were going through the Darkroot Basin. The mob I said in the first video, don't mess with him now. Well, this is his sort of brother, essentially, but rather than a halberd, this guy has a sword and shield. And I'm probably going to provide a very good demonstration as to why you don't want to mess with this guy, because he's extraordinarily hard, and if you're being incompetent, as I am here, then it tends to get fairly fatal. So I decided to engage this guy because I've never fought any of these knights without a shield. It's probably worth saying as well, I mean, combat in Dark Souls, if you have a sword and shield, you can very reliably make good progress in the game by simply raising your shield, having your shield up at all times, block an incoming attack. As soon as an enemy's attack hits your shield, with many enemies that will stop them in their tracks momentarily, and so if you, as soon as you block their attack, you smack them on, you're in pretty good shape. Now, some mobs you may need a bigger shield, you may need something like a great shield to actually stop them, otherwise they may continue their sort of combo. Great shields, if you end up with a heavy armoured character, by the way, are fantastic. A great shield is just a brilliant investment if you've got the stats to wield it. Yeah, so really it's as long as you've got the stamina and you mix in, you know, the shield blocks with a bit of dodging out the way, giving yourself time to recover stamina. While you're blocking, your stamina does not recover, so you need to be regularly anticipating when you're not going to get hit and stopping blocking temporarily just to let your stamina go back up. You can get items that will help you regen stamina as well, that will help you in sort of situations like that. Yeah, so you can, a lot of mobs, I'm very used to, it's one of the reasons I decided to do this playthrough, is I'm extraordinarily used to playing the game, and you block an attack, and you roll around a bit when you need to, but you don't need to rely on rolling precisely, because hey, you can just block. And even if that doesn't block all the damage from something big, it'll help a lot, and it just gives you more reaction time and makes things a lot simpler. Whereas, just like that there, I mean, without a shield, you're so vulnerable to getting owned by the smallest monster, whereas if you've got a shield in the way, you know, it'll just stop them straight off. So so it does get interesting. So I wanted to have a go at this Black Knight chap and see what I could do with him. These guys up here, for some reason, I always find a total pain in the ass, because if you sort of wander up and engage them in a half-assed fashion, they just chuck firebombs at you and laugh. Which is kind of annoying, so I'm being very conservative here and lobbing throwing knives at them that I bought from the merchant. I'm also keen to regain that green blob there. When you die, I don't know if you've seen this already, if you die in Dark Souls, then all the souls that you collected and any humanity you have, which is the number in the top left, any soft humanity you have, strictly speaking, stays with your corpse. If you die without recovering it, it's gone. So that's one of the reasons that going into challenging areas is a bit dangerous, because if you die and you can't get back to your body, then you're going to lose all the XP that you haven't spent so far. You don't lose any of your items, you know, you don't lose anything otherwise critical. But if you've just killed a boss, it can be really galling to die because you can lose, you know, a ton of XP, a ton of souls, I should say. I seem to be having immense problems here for some reason. That's what I love about this game. The simplest tasks, you know, you switch up your tactics slightly, you don't do things the way you're used to doing, and suddenly extraordinarily simple monsters are just owning you completely. But these guys with shields are just, especially these guys, I mean they're so simple to kill, and yet they're so bloody awkward. And yeah, that's just a demonstration of total lack of skill. I was quite careful to run in this direction when things are going badly, because that way, guarantee I can pick up my my souls and humanity. So now we're actually going to spend our XP to avoid losing it. I hope that's what I'm doing anyway. No, we've decided just to keep it. Why would you bother? Why worry about XP loss in a situation like this? I think I was checking weapon stats here actually. Sorry, this voiceover is recorded after the fact. I think trying to play Dark Souls and talk at the same time coherently would mostly be an exercise in me swearing at at the game and not actually having anything of value to say. So you can see there I've just stuck a point into attunement because I think I'm going to want a couple of attunement slots. I'm not sure I'm going to want more than that. I might end up wanting 3. Really with this character I'd like you know, a decent heal, and I'd also like you know, maybe some of the I might develop into faith later in the game, so particularly for some of the sort of missile attacks that you can get later on if you ally yourself with the right group. You can probably see I usually use the same technique on these guys, at least without a shield. Otherwise, I mean, you can, with a shield, you can just wander down there, let them hit your shield, and carry on. But it is kind of important to kill those guys because otherwise they can sneak up on you when you're fighting the next lot, and then it all goes horribly bloody. You can say I'm also carrying a Firekeeper's soul. These are items you find around the place. It is very worth taking them to a bonfire which has a Firekeeper. So the very first bonfire in the game is one of those. Essentially that's an NPC who stands around the bonfire and has a special plot relationship with it. They boost the bonfire. One thing they do is they mean you'll get extra Estus from it, so you'll probably notice that, or you may or may not have noticed, at the very first bonfire you actually tend to start off with 10 flasks rather than the 5 you get at every other bonfire, and that's because of the Firekeeper. If you end up with a soul of a long gone Firekeeper, which I picked up one of, I think, I'm not sure where I got that actually, then if you trade that into one of the Firekeepers, you can upgrade your Estus flask, which means it will restore slightly more health each time, and you can keep upgrading that to a fairly good level. It doesn't actually increase the number of heals you get. For that you need to kindle bonfires, which is one of the uses of humanity, which I will get around to talking about. It's one of the game's most initially confusing mechanics, as it's really not explained. It's also very volatile, humanity. It tends to come and go, and it can seem like the easiest thing to have tons of, or it can seem like you don't have any and it's impossible to get, depending on what uses you had for it. We're being conservative here, obviously decided just to rush in. Because when in doubt, leaping around dramatically is always a good substitute for any sort of technique or plan. Timing when you drink Estus becomes something of a kind of soft skill you learn as you go. A lot of the time it's, well, I just hope I'm not going to get attacked now. But sometimes straight after you've been attacked is a really good time. Sometimes, depending on the mob, it's a really bad plan. So that was the sort of kick and then strong attack there. It's one of the reasons I wanted not a scimitar, so not the starting weapon for this class, because, as I mentioned before, you can't kick with it. And kick is great. Kick just opens up enemies who've got a shield, and you've got then a second or so to give them a good stabbing. So we decided heroically not to go for the Black Knight there, and instead hit the most obvious trap in the game. That's actually the first time since I played this game, that I've actually been hit by that, so continuing to demonstrate expertise. So this is boss number 1, or about to be. First off though, in that barrel there is one of these little fellas, which hopefully I'll actually manage to kill, assuming I can manage to not just victimize the wall. Finally. So that gave me 2 large Titanite shards. You probably saw Titanite shards are your basic weapon damage upgrade, and also gear upgrade, so armor and shields. Large Titanite shards are for the next level upgrades. Once you get to +5, you need a special ember, special item you give to a blacksmith, and larger shards to upgrade, and you eventually get up to Titanite slabs for the very top level. And then Twinkling Titanite is used to upgrade certain items which can't be upgraded normally. There's also Demon Titanite, and there's Red Titanite, Green Titanite, used for upgrading different kinds of magic stuff, essentially. Demon Titanite for demon weapons, very special weapons you get either from taking them off a demon via one way or another, or finding them via odd routes. So this is post-tutorial boss number 1, the Taurus Demon. So I'm going to start with the standard technique for this boss. You really don't want to get hit by him, and that's the main thing with all bosses really, but certainly with this guy. So plunging attack, just jump off, hold down, or press attack on the way down, and you'll smack him extraordinarily hard. And then with this guy, run away. Now generally he will come for you, and you can see he was actually gearing up for a jump there. Once you've played this a few times, you can tell the difference between his different openings. So if he starts pulling his weapon back, he's going to do a big swim. He might suddenly go swimming, but I haven't seen that so far. If he sort of hunkers down, he's going to jump. A lot of that is based on your distance from him as well. So if you're too far away, he'll run over. If you're really close, he'll hit you. If you're middle distance, he might jump on you. So distance control, angle control with every boss is the most critical thing, and working out what attacks are triggered by what positions. That's another leap. So I took a little bit of damage there from the edge of his weapon hitbox. You can see my stamina's getting a good pummeling here as I'm leaping around the place, so having to time that as well. But he's nearly dead. Straight in for another hit. And that's him down. You may have noticed all of these orange markers on the ground. Those are actually, they're very confusing initially because at the very start of the game they're part of the tutorial and they're messages from the developers telling you what controls to use. So you'd imagine that the ones as you meet them later in game are hints to you from developers. They're in fact messages left by other players, and you can buy an orange item which will let you actually write messages yourself and upvote, downvote messages, but these are messages from other players. So sometimes they're really helpful, and sometimes they're not. They are made up from a very limited point-and-click select kind of vocabulary, so things like need X, try X, and that sort of thing, and X is one of a limited number of things. So they can be worth reading, but it's worth taking them with a pinch of salt, particularly if you're near the edge of a cliff and it says try jumping. Generally not a good plan.
An adherent of the Lord of Sunlight. Now that I am undead, I have come to this great land, the birthplace of Lord Gwyn, to seek my very own son. Do you find that strange? Well, you should. No need to hide your reaction. I get that look all the time.
Like all Dark Souls NPCs, he likes ending dialogue with ha 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 ha. They're very happy, everyone here. Either that or they're all insane, which seems equally plausible.
If you have a moment. The way I see it, our fates appear to be intertwined.
I always have time for Solaire. Solaire is the man.
Could that really be mere chance? So what do you say? Why not help one another on this lonely journey? This pleases me greatly. Well then, take this. We are amidst strange beings in a strange land. The flow of time itself is convoluted, with heroes centuries old phasing in and out. The very fabric wavers, and relations shift and obscure. There's no telling how much longer your world and mine will remain in contact. But use this to summon one another as spirits, cross the gaps between the worlds, and engage in jolly cooperation. Of course, we are not the only ones engaged in this, but I am a warrior of the sun. Spot my summon signature easily by its brilliant aura. If you miss it, you must be blind.
Yes. So jolly cooperation is one of Solaire's main functions in this game. It's something kind of hidden that I think really should be explained. One of the uses of humanity, you start off the game essentially hollowed, so as you can see in character creation I started off looking reasonably lively, and by the time I got to the prison I was a sort of hollow shell in a sort of zombie-like appearance. So essentially that's the hollowed look, because you are playing an undead without sufficient sort of vitality, without humanity. You are not vitality the stat, but certainly without humanity you are a sort of husk. If you make yourself human, which you can do with any sort of soft humanity you have, so that's the number in the top left, you can burn one of those to become human again, and that's reverse hollowing on this menu. That makes you human once more. It consumes that humanity. At that point you're back to human appearance, and there are certain differences in the way that you interact with the game at that point. In particular, multiplayer is enabled when you're human. So at that point you can bring in other people to help you, so you can play co-op. You can also invade other worlds. If you like a bit of killing, you can break into people's worlds. Also, if you're human, you can be invaded. So if you're wandering around and you're not hollow, then you need to be ready for, at some point, a very large and friendly message saying that someone's shown up to kill you, and you'll see a normally red spirit then wandering around and doing its best to take you out. Both co-op and invasion-style PvP do have benefits. You can pick up humanity and XP by doing that. You can actually earn a lot by doing that. If you enjoy it, it's a really nice way to sort of supplement your play, and there are people who play this game quite happily just for that aspect of it. You know, they'll get to a certain level, and then the whole point for them is PvP. And it is good technique based. You know, it's good fun fighting. The lag is a bit of an issue. It does make things rather difficult, but so a lot of it becomes about guessing what you think your opponent's going to do, because due to the delay you're not going to be able to see what they actually do in time to do something about it. So it's about sort of setting up situations where you expect them to do something like attack you with a certain attack that you know you will be able to parry, and then you would riposte in a certain way, and so on. So, but yeah, so that's one of the uses of humanity. The other one is kindling bonfires. If you are you've already reversed hollowing and you have spare humanity, you can use that to kindle a bonfire, which raises it up a level. You'll see the bonfire flame actually get brighter, and that will essentially mean that if you then sit down at the bonfire and rest, you will gain more Estus from that bonfire, so it'll take it from a 5 flask refill to a 10. So that's very much worth doing if you're having trouble with the game. In fact, when you first play it, I would kindle absolutely every bonfire you can, frankly. It's well worth it because you don't know when you're first starting how close that bonfire is going to be to a boss, or how much you might need those extra flasks, and it can be really useful. As you go on through the game, you will eventually learn how to kindle bonfires past that point, past the 10 point, so past the first kindling, with a rite of kindling. And that can also be handy for then if you go into New Game Plus, because you can kindle up all the bonfires to full, and then you can find your next playthrough easier because certain things in the game will persist across playthroughs.
Hello there. I am Pet. If not... Hello there. I realize that I have requested that we retain our distance, but I also want you to know that it is not meant in ill will. Here, take this as a token of peace. No, go ahead. It's for you. Oh my, you again. Oh, I know. How about this? I have to await my companions here anyway. So what if I were to teach you some miracles? Would that please you? Very
So
well.
I've come all the way back here because I want to pick up healing. In order to do that, I'm going to have to join a covenant, which is in the game's representation of guilds. You can have issues if you're leaving certain guilds and joining certain others, but certain covenants have certain benefits, like certain NPCs showing up and being friendly with you, maybe either selling you stuff or potentially helping you out, or giving you a chance to pick up extra items and powers. But in this case, I just want healing, and there's not really any penalty for leaving this sort of start covenant. So I'm just going to pick that up, and that's probably going to be all I need to do this episode.
My companions are Milady and her young knights. She is young, but burdened by an undead mission.